Let me illustrate the influence of conversion handicap with some results from poverty rates in the United Kingdom, dealing with the 1990s, obtained by Wibke Kukless. She was a young German student in Cambridge, in an illuminating thesis there at the university. The book has since then been published by Springer Verlag, a German publication, but in English. And I have to report here with great sadness that Wibke Kukless died shortly after completing her PhD thesis from a very nasty kind of cancer, which she suddenly diagnosed. And by the time I was examining the thesis, she was gone. She was going. I think she just saw the book was coming out. And I took the opportunity of writing a foreword to that book in the Springer Verlag. But her work was very, very striking. Taking a poverty cutoff line at 60% of the national median income, Wibke Kukless found that about 18% of persons in Britain in the mid-1990s lived in families with below poverty line income. If attention is now shifted to individuals in families with a disabled member, the proportion of individuals living on below poverty line income rises to 23%. This gap of about 5%, between 17% for all people, 23% for families with a disabled member, that gap of 5 percentage points largely reflects the income handicap, the earning handicap associated with disability and the care of the disabled. If now conversion handicap is added to this, and notice taken of the need for more income to ameliorate the disadvantages of disability, and only to the extent that it can be ameliorated, the proportion of individuals in families with disabled members who have inadequate income, that is, inadequate in terms of the adjusted income needs, jumps up to 47%. So the gap between 18 to 23 is due to earning handicap. 23 to 47, by far the biggest, is because of the conversion handicap, because of just taking note of the fact you need more income in order to do the same things if you're disabled. And then again, you would not be fully able even with that income. So the bulk of the handicap of disability comes from conversion disadvantage, and only a relatively small proportion from income handicap, which is all that the income-based indicators, those in the spirit of GDP, takes care of. Since the incidence of disability is relatively smaller in the United Kingdom than in many developing countries, the overall impact of taking note of conversion handicap of disabled people for the British population as a whole is relatively moderate. It raises the average incidence of poverty, when you take conversion handicap into account and split up the population into different groups. This raises the proportion of poverty from 18% poor people to 20%. Even though this rise is far from negligible, the difference would tend to be much larger in countries with the incidence of disability, where the incidence of disability is greater, which would apply to most developing and poorer countries. On top of that, the lives of people who are actually disabled, of course, would be severely handicapped by not taking note of this factor. Furthermore, some of the inputs of good living come not from personal income, but directly from social arrangements, such as institutions of public education, civic facilities, and social attitudes. Many disabled children, whether deaf or in wheelchairs, are denied, in effect, reasonable access to elementary education in many developing countries because of a lack of arrangements for disabled people. It has been estimated that of the 100 million more children who are out of school in the world today, 40 million or so have disabilities of one serious kind or another. Most of the schools, particularly in less developed countries, are built without access for children who have physical disabilities. And most teachers who are not trained to deal with children who who have handicaps of different, and most teachers are not trained to deal with children who have handicaps of different kinds, including learning disability. The conversion handicap applies thus not only to converting personal incomes into good living, but also to converting social facilities into actual usable opportunities. One further connection to note is that the lives of the disabled may be more challenged because of unfavorable social attitudes of physical and mental handicap. This is by itself a material factor in subjecting disabled people to a conversion handicap, but to these adversities has to be added the possibility of actual mistreatment to which disabled people are often subjected. There's considerable evidence that disabled people even have an increased risk in many situations of acquiring different kinds of diseases, including HIV, as it happens, due to physical and sexual abuse. This is a conversion handicap with a vengeance. A theory of justice that confines attention to earning handicap only can hardly come to grips with the demands of fairness that are central to the foundations of justice. So the conclusion I would come to is that we have to look at the diverse factors that influence the capabilities and freedom that people have in order to get an adequate understanding of the challenges of measurement of social and economic achievement. I do not have the opportunity to discuss the various evaluative and measurement problems. Some of them are technical that have to be addressed to apply the capability approach. But the literature on this now is quite extensive and, in my judgment, quite helpful. In Italy, too, this is an area of active research. For example, at Pavia University, led by Professor Enrica Chiapero-Martinetti. I've seen also the note that has been prepared for this meeting here and will be presented presently, called Beyond the GDP and the Crisis, which was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce, I understand. And I would be interested in that discussion. Many of these indicators chosen, like infant mortality, immediately relate to the capability deprivation. Some of the other indicators probably do not. So it would be nice to know what the underlying philosophical approach is in the selection of indicators. But I postpone that discussion, A, because I'm running out of time, and B, because I would like to hear the discussion. So I end with some remarks on the problem of sustainability, brief remarks, I might say, which includes a re-examination of what I've been using all the time so far, adequacy of living standards as the guiding spirit between the evaluation of economic and social achievement. The first remark is fairly straightforward. If we take the capability approach, then in wanting to sustain our living standards, we have to look not merely at the capabilities that people have today, but at the influences that would affect the capabilities of people tomorrow. Global warming, for example, could have detrimental effects on both the income both the income disadvantage and the conversion disadvantage of people. Even though the assessment of the threat of global warming often concentrates on the disasters in terms of the incomes and opulence of vulnerable people, we also have to see